Hey guys, we're going over the duels at Daytona. Now I apologize, I have a cough, so if you see me throwing these in my mouth, like most people my age are throwing Zins in their mouth, that is why. I'm going to do my best to not cough or anything during this video, but I just don't want to keep, throwing days away hoping this goes away. But because this is a duel race, obviously there are several caveats that we need to go over. Obviously, and I will discuss them throughout, but, just to get out there, yes, we have multiple people trying to qualify their way in. We have the Castro Neves situation being locked in regardless. We'll talk about that as we get there. But the main one that I want to talk about right off the bat is I will probably be using broad strokes when I'm explaining, oh, this guy is a good driver, oh, this guy is a bad driver, etc., because this race is different from the other plate races. Obviously, in those, we just want to stack from the back, clearly. But in this race, it is much more important to play the good cars and good teams. We don't really see wrecks, etc., etc. I mean, we'll talk through that, but that's going to be the main thing that you might hear me say or do. And I've already had a lot of people ask me in private, how do so many people being in different teams, different situations shake up? Are we approaching the race any differently? Short answer is no. Long answer is still no. But in terms of talking about who's a good plate racer, how either their approach is going to increase, change, the variables on each individual driver's approaches in the 500 and stuff, that'll be talked about during those races. We're just talking about the duels here. So if you have questions related to those specific drivers, that'll be answered, as we get closer to the 500 and not the duel video you're looking at right now. Now, I do have this playlist that I will link in the description below, and I will, first off, if you are new to watching my stuff, which actually quite a lot of people are, I would encourage you to watch these videos, okay? We have over 5 hours, if not more, content for you, specifically for plate races, for duels, etc. And when you watch any videos specifically related to, plate racing and everything going forward, I'm running with the assumption that you are already aware of everything I've talked about in these videos. So if I talk about something or if I don't mention something, and you can find it in this playlist. If I get killed in a trucking accident, any day now, this is probably my magnum opus. I'm the happiest about this playlist that I've made. And I would encourage you to watch the DFS Duels preview that is in this playlist. That is in the description below if you haven't already seen it, since there's so many new people here. But as we look at the duels, okay, now these are Duel 1 and Duel 2. What we're looking at here, and what you're seeing on your screen, is this is the starting position. So obviously, 1 through 22, I just have it just because I pulled it from my stuff. But 1 through 22, as that's the most people we've ever had. This year, we're going to see 22 and 23 cars in the respective duels. And what this is doing is giving you an idea of where these starting positions are finishing. So what you're seeing here is the starting position. You are then seeing the finish position of the number one starter in these races. What you are seeing over here is the driver who was there. So 2016, Matt Kenseth in duel number 2, he started first, he finished 16th. Kyle Busch in 2016 started second, finished first, etc., etc. You look at duel number 1, this is the list of all the pole sitters that we've had. So you've seen the Hendrick dominance, the Alex Bowman, pretty much starting in the front row in any of these situations. So you're seeing the Daytona 500 pole sitter finishing 7th, 17th, 7th, 20th, 8th, 16th, 14th, etc., etc. The reason why I'm using this, not only because, it's going with what is displayed in this video, just continuing on, but this is how I view these duel races and what I use to view if people are good or bad, okay? What we're seeing over here is the average finish of these positions in these events, okay? So you're clearly seeing if you're starting in the back, if you're starting 21st in Duel 1, the average finish of these races or these drivers has been 18.5, and so on and so forth. So here we are to the first, point or bullet point or discussion point when we look at these races, and that is that the pole sitter and the outside pole sitter, the two fastest people on Wednesday qualifying, are locked into the front row of the 500, as long as they don't damage the car or have to make changes to it that are unapproved. Okay? So, they have no incentive to race. They have absolutely no incentive to race. They are just here to ride, get through, etc., etc., okay? And you see that specifically on the top 2 starting positions. Or actually, I mean, just when I say top 2, I'm meaning for the 500, because Duel 1 is the grid for the inside lane, Duel 2 is the grid for the outside lane for that race. So you're seeing outside of the 2017 race where Chase Elliott started first for the 500, everybody else has dropped positions, okay? And what you can view this as, now it isn't a one-to-one comparison, but this gives you a really good idea of where the points or the DraftKings points and the positions that you want to target in your lineups are coming from, okay? Yet again, we're practically removing the pole sitter for the 500, i.e. the pole sitter for duel number 1. No incentive to race. They don't want to tear anything up. They don't want to do anything crazy, okay? You do not want to play the pole sitter at all. It is more than likely they will ride in some form or fashion and not win this race and not run up front. Same thing can be said really about the second place driver. Now, when you look at these names, okay, you're seeing that we have a lot of good drivers up here. There's no drivers in the top 2 of duel number 1 that are bad, okay? We're not getting bad teams. We're not getting people who don't deserve to be there. We're not getting any of that stuff. These are all 5-star teams, right? All top tier equipment, okay? So if they are finishing bad in a duel, which is typically going green, we're typically seeing a green flag pit stop in these duels. Also, before we get to there, this year we do have practice before qualifying and before the duels. The last few years we have only had the first on-track activity be the duels. So yet again, almost even more conservative. That's kind of why I boxed in the next-gen races, since we haven't had practice for these events, or for the 500 with this car. But when we are looking at where these front guys are running and finishing, it is very rare. Now, yet again, we see 2 race winners here, or 3 race winners here out of the top 2 in these races here. But it's more than likely the situation that they are going to lose positions in this race and possibly finish 9th, 10th, 12th, whatever the case may be. Average finish is 8.56 here. Now, we move on to third place, and we see that really, we have some pretty red flags here between 17th, 18th, or the finishing positions of these individuals, and these were Hemrick, Byron, and Truex. Now, if we take these guys out, because obviously, we're between these averages, it's 18.3. If we remove those outliers, and we can talk about possible situations that are causing this stuff, we're seeing a 6.6 average between these 3. The situations that go into these duels, when we look at these individual drivers here, right, nobody's working with Hemrick. Right? Okay, nobody's working with Hemrick. Byron could have spun a pit lane, had something happen, and Truex, outside of Kyle Busch, top of my head, right off the bat, possibly to Benedetto and or Castle, no Toyotas in this race, okay? So what the intricacies of the dual races is that typically we're going to see a green flag pit stop. We're going to see a green flag pit stop divided into manufacturers and or teams and affiliate teams, right? On top of the guys racing for their way in, okay? So there's like 4 different mind games and sub-games going on within these 60-lap races and stuff, okay? That could possibly lead, or, yet again, I mean, it's NASCAR, but that could possibly lead to the variance of who's performing good, who's performing bad. As we continue to go down, what is another outlier performance here? Last year in 2024, 18th for Austin Dillon. Well, it's Austin Dillon. What are we expecting? Todd Gilliland also finished last? Wow, what a shock. What a surprise, if you're not a good driver and or you run into variance and pit stops or whatever the case may be, those are situations where people in good cars and in good starting positions can potentially fall back. But for the most part, we are wanting to target drivers from like 3rd to like 15th and 16th. Maybe a bit farther down if we see a situation where it's, hey, Tyler Reddick, 2311, hey, Carson Hocevar here. Obviously, that makes sense of wanting to chase good cars. But for the most part, if you're starting in the back of the field, it's because you're slow. Okay, now, yet again, talking about the qualifying for the 500, we have 45 drivers going for, 40 positions. Okay, it's going to sound convoluted. It's going to be a mouthful. Top two fastest from the open cars are locked in on speed. Okay, we're going to hear a lot in the broadcast, a lot in the practice. Well, they have the speed to fall back on. They'll make this, and if they're out right now, but they fall back on. If you're the two fastest cars of the open cars, you're locked into the 500, okay? So the other open cars in the duels are fighting for one position. That's all we're looking at, okay? That's how it's going to sound way more convoluted as it is during the duel race. It's going to be that's all it is, okay? So very similar to the pole sitter for the 500 and the outside pole sitter for the 500. The two fastest open cars have no incentive to race, have no incentive to tear anything up. They just want to survive. They're in on speed. Okay, they have locked in on speed. They have that speed to fall back on, etc., etc. So when we're looking at the back of the field, that's why, we're eliminating potentially somebody who, actually, we're just eliminating probably the fastest open car. They're already in. No reason for them to race. It'd be stupid for them to. Okay? We're also eliminating the bad teams. Okay? Now, Rick Ware has charters outside of LaJoy. Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I had to find the list of the open cars really fast just to talk out loud. The 01, Corey LaJoy, Rick Ware car can very easily get there. Now, this is going to be, yet again, one of those brushstrokes, right? Who has a good car, who has a bad car. LaJoy, good car. Allgaier, good car. J.J. Yaley, the major question mark. Truex, basically a 2311, basically a Joe Gibbs car, good car. Anthony Alfredo, question mark. Okay. Chandler Smith, question mark on if it's a true MBM car, which at this point, hey, we have practice on Wednesday to determine this, plus the qualifying speed. We will have that answer when the duels come. But question mark for Chandler Smith. We saw BJ McLeod have the car, have the speed, so I'm not concerned about him. Jimmy Johnson is just kind of bad. Question mark, and then Castro Neves in the show regardless, so it doesn't even matter there. Really, like DEFCON, 3 and 2 start to hit when we get, if Helio doesn't make it in, and he starts 41st. DraftKings hasn't updated the scoring for that situation as of yet, so I guess we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. But for the most part, the only bad cars we see right off the bat are J.J. Yaley and Chandler Smith and Anthony Alfredo. Now, why is that important if we're looking at the back of these fields here? And yet again, two of those cars will be locked in on speed. We can remove them from the pool. We can most likely remove a majority of them because outside of the cases that they start high up or in the mid-pack and stuff, there's a real chance they were racing very defensive and are just trying to do the bare minimum to meet people in the back of the field. Okay, and or they start in the back of the field. Like we can address that when it happens, but for the most part, the open cars are just racing each other, okay? There's a real chance they are not in play of who is actually going to win the duel, who's going to be up front, etc., etc. Okay, so a lot of these reds of the guys back here, we don't want to target them. We don't want to focus on them, okay? There's a likelihood they're racing against each other. There's a likelihood that they're not fast enough cars to work their way up through the field. They are most likely not the, top-tier factory-supported teams. And when I say that, I mean, the RCR, ECR group, the Hendrick Motors group, the Toyotas, the fast Toyotas, 2311 and Joe Gibbs, so on and so forth. And so we mainly just really want to focus on the good drivers and stuff, okay? Like, sure, Carson Hocevar was starting 20th last year, clearly better than that, but we don't really want to focus on the Spire cars if they're starting, up front or in the mid, or up front between first and seventh and stuff like that. We don't want to, go goo gaga over Front Row Motorsports because there's the likelihood of them or where they're going to start will most likely compete for the pole or be towards the back of the field, et cetera, stuff like that. As we look at these duels, we're going to see a bit of a difference between the first duel and the second duel. Now, typically the first duel, if there's going to be a one that has a wreck, there's a real chance it's duel number 1, either due to people having issues entering pit lane or whatever the case may be. We typically see duel 2 be much more centered around the 2nd to 8th, 2nd to 10th area of running, up front and stuff. Now, with that said, as of late, we see a bit of a difference between the Gen 6 car and how they would race here, and how the next gen car is racing here. Now, for whatever reason, last year, the good cars of the Joe Gibbs Brigade, Bell, Hamlin, not Joe Gibbs Brigade, but like Smith, Nemechek, I mentioned front row kind of, off the cuff there. A couple of sentences ago. Like, for whatever reason, these guys qualified just poorly, right? And real likelihood that they are going to be the fastest guys. Like, when we start looking through the starting grid of this race, it's McDowell, Cindric, Byron, Kyle Busch. Okay, whatever, good play. We're not playing McDowell, right? We're not playing Burton, And yet again, he finished 5th, but for the most part, I don't view Burton as a good driver. I wouldn't view Riley Herbst because he was in I believe that's a Rick Ware car, or potential off car last year. Off the top of my head, I could be wrong. We get to Briscoe, we get to Noah, whatever, right? Then we get to Blaney. Okay, now Blaney finishes 18th, situation where he should have finished better. But we start getting to AJ, knows what he's doing. We get to Keselowski, gonna race up front, gonna be aggressive. Reagan in on speed. Bubba Wallace, good car. Haley, good car and good driver. Bell, good car, good driver. Et cetera for Hamlin and Smith. And so there are going to be situations where we do have good guys in the back, and that's where we want to focus on them. But typically in duel number 2, it's usually more aggressive to the front. Now, yet again, if we're not including, the Gen 6, then it's kind of more all over the place and stuff. But typically, at least in the past years, back when we would have practice, back when we would have time on the track, back when people qualified where they should be, yet again, these guys qualified so poorly, that's their first time on the track. Okay, I don't think we're going to see situations like this to where we have good teams starting in the back of these duels. It doesn't make sense to me when teams are going to have time on the track to put down a good qualifying time. We should not have good cars in the back of the field on these duel races. It should just be star power up front, bad cars and bad teams in the back of the field, especially once teams who are especially racing their way in, or the slower teams, are able to see where they line up speed-wise with other teams. Everybody's going to be able to make adjustments. We're not going to have situations to where, we have, Connor Daly, in 2023, where this car is bouncing up and down the track and not even set up to go at full speed, et cetera, and he still makes the race because people, get stupid and ends up finishing 17th and beating people that he needs to beat when Austin Hill and Pastrana got involved in a wreck, I believe, in their duel race. Anyway, because of that, I lean a lot towards this older data for both of these duels. That's why I went ahead and included all the way back to 2016. Now, we really don't see that big of a drastic difference between the next-gen years and the Gen 6 years, but at least for duel number 1 or whatever. But that's what I would lean towards, or because of the fact that we have Braxton Cuba for it. Okay, so now that we're past that, okay, since we're not stacking from the back in dual races, okay, for the most part, unless it's given to us, right? Which, yet again, I think last year was an outlier. This is Johnson, or Reddick, Hocevar, Nemechek, Smith, Hamlin, Bell, Haley, Bubba Wallace. All these guys qualified poorly just last year out of nowhere. I think that's a pretty that's a situation where I just don't think we're going to see happen, okay? So, because of that, and the fact that salary is going to be soft, okay, because we're only going to have 22, 23 cars per dual race, so we're not going to have 7 guys priced at $10K. You just wouldn't do that. We can afford to aim for the majority of good teams and good cars. Joe Gibbs, Hendrick, Penske. Can't for the life of me think of any other names of teams right off the top of my head. Joe Gibbs, et cetera. Because we can afford it salary-wise. We know how they're going to race. They're most likely going to stick together based on manufacturers and teams. Okay? The reason that gives an advantage is because when you look back and look at where people have finished, now the Hendrick Brigade has not been as struck by this if they are the ones leading the Chevy, when they're pitting and stuff. But if you have the ECR idiots, Spire, Richard Childress, specifically the Childress guys, if they are leading the when are we short pitting or when are we getting to our number and stuff, they will absolutely lose to other manufacturers. We see the Fords be extremely aggressive and extremely good at strategy, working as a team, working together. Okay, so yet again, as we've gone through, we're talking about all the sub games in these duels. Now we're at the point to where I personally prefer the Ford drivers in these races and the Joe Gibbs or the Toyota drivers in these races. When you're looking at the three manufacturers of how they approach it, I would rank it Ford is the best of how they can race and what they usually end up doing. Usually that is being led by Penske and RFK. I mean, clearly. But like if you get Keselowski, Logano, Buescher or Cindric in a duel, real chance that those guys are going to be competing to win the race. Okay, you get a majority of the Toyota guys in it, specifically with Hamlin or Bubba Wallace, Reddick, and stuff like that. Real chance they're the front runners to win the race. If you have a situation or duel where you have, Keselowski, Logano, Denny Hamlin in a race, those guys are most likely going to be the front runners to win the race, okay, regardless of where they start, okay? What we're trying to do here is have the best idea or have the best chance of building top 10 drivers or top 10 finishers, okay? Yes, we might need a value play coming from 19th to 13th or whatever, but for the most part, if you are nailing top 10 finishers, and especially the top 3 to 4, who's going to finish top, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 5, 6, 8, stuff like that. That's how you are building for this race, okay? So, yet again, that's why looking at where these positions are, or what starting positions are leaning themselves towards the top, 5 finishing positions and stuff. That's why this is so important, okay? It's not, obviously, yes, it's about the driver at the end of the day because we can't make the lineups before that, but looking at the data and seeing where we get winners from, where we get top 5 drivers from and stuff, that's what we're leaning towards, okay? Same thing with, Duel 1. It's still, a majority in the middle of the grid, okay, for the most part. If we're, using broad strokes, it's like 3rd to 16th, 3rd to 15th in both races, okay? Outside of, clear, obvious, somebody messed up in Q or qualified dead last or whatever, right? Like Harvick starting, dead last in his heat race in 2016, right? Like, of course you would play him. We're not going to prioritize Josh Wise. We're not prioritizing 2017 Corey LaJoie, 2019 Cody Ware. But, hey, if Harvick's back there, we're going to prioritize him. If Reddick, if Hocevar, if teams that are actually, or drivers that are actually good, like we want to prioritize. Don't remember what happened here in 2023 with Stenhouse, situation where it's probably a fucking Chevy situation of them just being a bunch of morons. If you notice, the reason why I'm bringing that up is constantly, whether it's duels, whether it's real Daytona or real, Talladega, and Daytona pit strategies, the Chevys are always trying to be the first ones to pit, and they are always so bad at organizing that between all their teams, okay? You would think that having the highest car count in the field would be easier to do that. If anything, it's harder, especially because they don't have that many top-tier teams It's literally just Hendrick leading that, and then you have RCR doing whatever, and then anybody who's, trying to fill out a team is running Chevy, right? So when they're pitting, it's usually a bit uncoordinated. There's issues on pit lane. They take forever to get lined up and stuff. Whereas you compare it with like the Fords, for example. Go back and look at races. When Fords are pitting, when Toyotas are pitting, they are much more organized. They know what they're doing. They're not racing side by side as soon as they leave the apron down the back straightaway. They're not, screwing each other over in pit lane. They just have smoother pits and stuff. And that's really what determines a dual race, okay? Especially because the likelihood of yellows are very low. Now, yet again, I'm not saying it can't happen, especially when you have idiots, trying to race their way in. But for the most part, the variance and destruction that yellows bring are a very small thing for duels. They are typically coming late in the races when, people are being desperate after green flag pit stops, when people are trying to block runs, etc., etc. So the danger of a yellow or being involved is typically late in the race, and it's usually in the mid-pack range, okay? We're seeing that happen a lot. When you look at where the yellows are coming specifically in duels compared to other races, they're coming either in the middle of the pack or in the back of the pack. That's why it's so important. It's imperative that our good drivers, are up front racing for lead. Now, excuse me. Now, we have had situations, I believe it was Duel 2, and it was, where is Logano? It may have been this one here. What is 22? 9, maybe. Let's see, Logano, what is this one? 21. I'm pretty sure it's this race here. It's the first year of the next-gen car. Yeah, because Logano finishes 9th because there's only 9 people in the lead lap, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and check really fast. So we'll look at 2022 Duel 2, and then we'll kind of like zip through just all the trends of these races really fast. But I don't know why Racing Reference is doing this. I've been pulling shit from Racing Reference all day, and it just broke on the browser, so I don't. Whatever. You see that we only had 8 guys on the lead lap. Now, Logano led this entire race, throws a bad block on Buescher. All these guys coming out of 2 on the white flag, and ends up wrecking, and he doesn't finish. But he's the first car 1 lap down when this race ends, so he technically finishes 9th in a crashed car, okay? But you see the amount of people on the lead lap here, okay? Because, hey, the Fords, Logano, like when we look at where these teams are in terms of what's going on here. Now, yet again, Eric Amarola had an issue, went 2 laps down, whatever case that happened here. But you see, Reagan is in, but we have Toyota, Chevy. Actually, we'll just go through. Actually, we'll talk about the good guys. So Ford, Toyota, right? That's, yeah. Ford, Toyota, Chevy, Ford, right? Those are your front runners in this race. Mainly that was determined on pit lane. When this race goes green, your race and everything is being, calculated by what the pit road is, okay? That's what caused all these people to go a lap down, because these guys are able to get organized in 60 laps. When these guys didn't, they lost the draft and got lapped, okay? So let's go ahead and just look at the last, we'll do, actually, I can just do this, actually. Come on. Why is it double? Oh my God, hold on. All right, so I got the last 4 years available. This is Duel 1 of last year, okay? We look at where this yellow happened, okay? Late in the race, post green flag pit stop, okay? How many people on the lead lap? Now yet again, people possibly got the wave rounds and stuff at this situation, as we had the free pass be the 62 of Anthony Alfredo. But, and this was in, I don't remember what caused this one. Shout out Jimmy Johnson, right? But, this race was going green up into the end. We look at the second race last year, and we have, 11 to go in this situation, and we wreck big major on the front straightaway. Okay, we look at 2 years ago. Duel 1 went green the entire way. And man, I was really hoping. I just realized I was like, oh, it'd be cool if Racing Reference had the intervals and stuff. But you have 15 drivers on the lead lap, okay? And you see, especially in a race that went green here, who are the teams that are up front? Ford, Toyota, Ford, Toyota, Toyota, Chevy, Ford, Chevy, Toyota, Chevy. Like, Ford and Toyota are way better at organizing stuff on pit lane, on racing. They're just better guys. And they're better plate racers. Logano, Blaney, Bell, like, these guys know what they're doing, okay? Race number 2 from 2 years ago. Now, we had a debris caution. That kind of screws everything up, and then we wreck, on lap 42. So, I mean, yet again, variance is happening, but we only lose 4 guys here. We look back 3 years ago. Duel number 1 goes green to the end. Who are the people up front? Ford, Chevy. Could have been Toyota at this point. Chevy, Toyota, Chevy, so on and so forth. Okay, we went green. We had a total of 15 guys in the lead lap. All these bad cars back here, lost the draft, didn't have people to work with, so on and so forth. That's why you don't want to play the bad teams or the open teams or the guys who aren't running every week or the people who have, slight affiliation to a team but not really, like the 62 car, okay, the 66 car for MBM, stuff like that. We look at the second race from 3 years ago. We have a crash on the white lap or on the white flag. That is the one I was referring to with Logano. But we see Ford, Toyota, Chevy, Ford. You get the point. Okay, we go to 2021, Duel 1. We go green to the end. Okay, 15 people on lead lap. Look at all these people who got lapped. Bad car. For at this point, 43. Bad car with Quinn, Timmy Hill. Bowman is just riding, no reason to tear the car up. Pole sitter for the 500, right? Rick Ware car, and then the Rick Ware car. Like, come on. We look here. Who's up front? Ford, Toyota, Ford, Chevy, Ford, right? Okay, we look at 2021 Duel 2. Okay, now we go into overtime here, which is quite rare. Absolutely really rare, but yet again, they wrecked late in this race here, and this is just a lot of crashes for a dual race. That's a lot of cars torn up and stuff. We go in overtime. That's still crazy. The fact that we have 14 cars on the lead lap still is pretty wild. It should be way more than that. So, I mean, this is just kind of going on whatever the hell happens at the end of this race. But this is how I view the dual races. This is how I look at this, and so when I'm targeting how to build, when I'm targeting the lineups that I want to use, it is, like from duel number 1, it's most likely using cars from, 3rd to 15th, like being really, really heavy in that range outside of obvious either value plays or good cars in the back, but I just don't think we're going to run in that situation this year with practice before. And then in duel 2, I'd be okay being a bit more aggressive on that and doing like, 2nd to 17th. Yet again, for whatever reason, the car starting 2nd in Duel 1. Yet again, for whatever reason, I mean, it's been good cars too. Whatever the case may be, data's saying that they're just kind of struggling here. You're not locked in. You're not doing anything. The guy who's 4th though, like 2nd place is very much in play in Duel number 2. Technically 4th fastest, so you're yeah, sure, you're close to being the top 2, but you're just not there. They just seem to race. They're usually a good car. I'm much more interested in using the 2nd place starter in duel number 2 than duel number 1. But I mean, we're splitting hairs there. But for the most part, these are the areas and starting positions that I want to target in the duel races. Whereas all the other races are a much different story when it comes to plate races and stuff like that. Anyway, I want to go over this. I wanted to try and get my voice back before I recorded, but I was losing too many days. And yeah, hopefully it helps you. Yet again, check out that playlist that is in the description, and I will talk to you guys later when we start discussing, all the other races for Daytona. So I'll see you guys later.